Call Eugenie Sage.
Okay, Mr Chair, thank you very much. Well, I thank Mr O'Rourke for explaining my supplementary order paper number 317. And this is because part 2 goes to the real heart of the bill. It's in clause 6, of course, that the bill overrides the normal processes that would apply under the Reserves Act and the Resource Management Act. And so the supplementary order paper, because there is no plan change process, because the bill sidesteps that, in a plan change process where you're rezoning what is now open space to residential mixed housing urban land, you would normally get an opportunity for public submissions and those submissions to deal with issues like what the impacts of that zoning change would be, how the plan should have new objectives, new policies and new rules to guide the future use and development of the land. So this the provisions in the Resource Legislation Amendment Act, which the Parliament debated earlier this year, make a much faster process for the way in which subdivision activity takes place, and there is no guarantee that applications for subdivision consents are actually going to be notified. So the SOP, as a minimum, requires that there is a resource consent application for the housing development that is a notified activity, and that puts in play a number of provisions that it must protect the habitat of the dotterel, the shore plover, avoid adverse effects from land disturbance, because we've got no certainty, given that the bill sidesteps the plan change process, that there will be adequate provisions to ensure that the development doesn't lead to quite significant sedimentation in Oamaru Creek and in the Tamaki estuary. And so we're certainly aware of Ngāti Pawa's major commitments to enhancement of the people, the land and the community. But we, from experience with a number of big resource consent applications and developments, you need those sort of commitments to be put in as conditions of the consent or as clear plan objectives. So a question for the Minister is that if this SOP wasn't supported by the government, how is the government going to guarantee that the local community in Tamaki, in Point England and Palmyra and Glen Innes actually get a say on this housing development and how it happens? How can the government guarantee that the consent will be notified? The Council has said there will be a consent process, but there's absolutely no guarantee, because of the government's changes to the RMA, that people will actually get the opportunity to have a say in that. So we encourage members to support that SOP to make sure that the community can actually participate in how this housing development happens, what sort of density it is, what provisions there are for connectivity, for walkways, for cyclists, for pedestrians, how the major earthworks that are likely to be required on this very wet site will be dealt with, how sediment measures are to be put in place, and things like site hardening. We're given Oamaru Creek is a very polluted waterway. If there's a lot more asphalt, large roofs, there'll be a lot more stormwater generated. The Auckland Council is providing some tens of millions to improve catchment management for Oamaru Creek, but there will be significantly increased stormwater volumes if there's a lot of site hardening with this development. But Mr Chair would also like to go on and talk to some of the issues around the loss of the reserves and the loss of the playing fields and the SOP that is in the Minister's name. Because, Mr Chair, we heard a lot of submissions concerned about the effect of the housing development in doing away with areas that are used for sports. Point England Reserve currently has 6 full-sized sports fields in the southern part of it. There are 4 Kalikiti wickets. Those Kalikiti wickets are used during the week and during the weekend. They are very popular with the Pacifica community, and the Auckland Council, in its Sports Network Needs Analysis report, went through and looked at what the impact would be on the Tamaki area from the loss of these sports fields and the Kalikiti wickets at Point England when they're overcome with housing. That needs analysis shows that there is no potential within the existing sports parks for the wickets, the Kalikiti wickets that are displaced at Point England, being accommodated there. And that's because of the large scale and size of these Kalikiti wickets. It also found that most of the other sports parks in the vicinity have already been developed to capacity through things like having sand carpets and floodlights. So there will be a significant shortfall in terms of playing hours if this land is sacrificed to housing. And so what does the Minister do in response? Well, we have supplementary order paper 321, which cuts across, Mr Chair, thank you, Mr Chair, which cuts across, once again, the decision-making by the Auckland Council. Instead of allowing the Auckland Council to look at how the lost sports fields capacity should be dealt with, the Minister, through his SOP, will amend the bill to insist that the Council provide another 5.3 hectares on the balance of the Point England Reserve, which isn't going to have houses put on it, for sports fields, and that increases after 12 months to 8.4 hectares. So Mr O'Rourke called it micromanagement, and I agree. It is the Minister, once again, as a characteristic of his, imposing his will on Aucklanders rather than allowing the democratically elected council to deal with this issue of the shortfall in sports fields. And we have the government not responding to submissions because a lot of the concern amongst many submitters was about the loss of open space. There were fewer submitters that were concerned about the loss of sports fields, but those that were concerned. And so this SOP of the Minister's has come out of left field. It wasn't signalled in select committee, and it is the government just attempting once again to be seen to be doing something when all it is undermining democracy. And the loss of the sports fields is significant, Mr Chair, because the Auckland Council paid out over $60 million to the Auckland University in 2016 to buy Colin Maiden Park. That has got a number of sports facilities in it. The Council doesn't have the resources to keep doing that, to buy more land for sports fields. So the government has completely understated the impact on particularly the Pacifica community through the loss of the Kalikiti area, when the Pacifica population in the Tamaki area is expected to increase by 42% by 2038. It hasn't looked at how the Auckland Council is supposed to deal with the loss of the sports fields for housing, and it just instead is doing this quick and dirty SOP to require that the rest of the reserve be sacrificed for sports fields instead of the open space that it currently is. And, Mr Chair, the regulatory impact statement notes that the changes in the SOP are unusual because, once again, they are being done through primary legislation which is overriding the normal processes in the Reserves Act and the RMA for the Council to actually decide what should happen on the balance of the land which remains as council land. So that is really symbolic, this SOP of the Ministers, for the provisions in the primary bill which cut across local democracy, cut across local decision-making. But I do want the Minister and the Chair to answer what guarantee is there, if the bill goes through without my SOP, that the community in Tamaki will actually get to have a say on the resource consent application, because we're not having that North Plan change process, and there is no ability to constrain the housing development to ensure that it is sustainable, to deal with the issues like coastal hazard, to deal with the issues like sediment, the density, the public transport access, the connectivity in terms of to other reserves like Tahuna Torea, the connectivity to the local shopping centre, unless those sort of issues are discussed through the resource consent process. But at the moment, there is absolutely no guarantee that that consent application will be publicly notified or that there will be any opportunity for locals to actually have their say.
Michael Wood.
Very happy to take a call on this part of the bill, part 2.